Questions are for the team at the Refugee Center from Montreal. If I'm not mistaken, your agency is funded by federal dollars. Is that correct?
No, we actually diversify our funding. So we do have private funding as well as grants from, again, private foundations.
You have some government funding as well, or is just most or all private funding?
We have some federal funding, but it's absolutely not the majority.
Okay, got it. And you folks have been around since 2015, is that correct, the agency? Have you seen an influx in refugees that you're serving in that time frame? Has there been a spike in any of those years?
I've been at the center for 4.5 years, and I would say that the influx that we see is fairly steady. The only thing that I personally have noticed is that when policies change in either the U.S. or in other countries of origin, or if political situations change in countries of origin, then we do tend to see the demographic shift with that.
Wow. And I don't know if you track this in your agency, but do you track employment outcomes in your agency? And so what are the success rates in terms of 6 months, 12 months, or whatever metric you use to track employment outcomes?
Yes, so the tracking is relatively new. We do have a sector within our center that does pair refugee claimants with employment. Of course, the main goal is to make sure that people are autonomous and self-sustaining. I would say typically we are able to match refugees and empower them to get employment within, I would say, about between 6 to 12 months. It's a large range, but as I said, the tracking is fairly new.
So what percentage would not be able to find employment within those 6 to 12 months after going?
It's a very, very small percentage. I would say under 10%.
Okay. And how about official language proficiency? What are you seeing in terms of those rates coming out of your center?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the demographic. Of course, Haitians come knowing French. Potentially there's some literacy issues on that end, but that's very easily solvable. When it comes to being based in Quebec, French is, of course, the language that refugee claimants need to learn. There's provincial classes for French. However, the wait times are quite long. They go past 6 months. At the center, we do provide both English and French classes. So I would say that the majority, if not all of our clients, do speak both languages.
So you mentioned something about the bureaucratic mess that you see from Ottawa. So do you get any kind of targets or coordination from Ottawa in terms of resources or a heads up of the influx that you see, or is it you're sort of going in blind most of the time?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sort of going in blind at the time. Through different networking opportunities, we can potentially ask questions. But yes, going in blind.
Normal channel, you gotta maybe have a cocktail in order to get that information out of them, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a complete mess. So just out of curiosity, if a refugee who came to your center and they were charged with a crime or was convicted with a crime and you knew about it, would you still, like in Canada, not back in their home country, but in Canada, would your center still provide services to that refugee?
We've been fortunate enough to not actually be faced with this problem. So unfortunately, I cannot give you an answer from experience on that.
Hypothetically, if you knew about a charge with a refugee, like a refugee that received a criminal charge or was convicted of a crime, would you still provide services to?
I think that there would be a lot of questions for that person before we can decide whether or not to take on that case.
It's not a hard no.
It depends on the nature of the crime and if it was actually if it actually was committed instead of a wrongful charge.
What about crimes like maybe extortion or robbery, something like that nature? Would you consider taking on a refugee? And
I don't think that I can give you a full answer on that. Unfortunately, our legal clinic would be the one to make the decision on that.
But you would still
30 seconds.
Provide resources in terms of legal clinic services to that refugee.
Providing the legal services would be up to the legal clinic itself. When it comes to other services, we don't necessarily look at people's criminal records when we provide them with language classes, for example.
A last question. Do you provide criminal defense services to refugees by any chance? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Macklin, I just want to
pick up on something my colleague, Mr. Ho, was talking about. For example, there was a trial for 3 men in Abbotsford that murdered an elderly couple, Arnold and Joanne de Jong. It started last month. And one of the accused is an Indian national who's in Canada on a student student visa. And so if someone like him chooses to make an asylum claim after the fact, once he's been charged with this, do you believe that they should be eligible to claim asylum, or should Canada be able to deport someone like that?
Indian law, as it currently exists, that person would be ineligible to seek refugee protection.
We've seen this happen. For example, just last month in BC, there was a dozen, I think, people that were charged with extortion, I believe, in Surrey, and then they all turned around and claimed asylum.
If they are convicted, they are ineligible to make refugee claims.
Okay, so they weren't convicted yet, but obviously in the case of these 12, they clearly feared that. Do you think it's right for them to be able to claim asylum after being in the country for a while?
They can claim asylum. I don't know that it's right or wrong for them to be able to claim asylum, but they're not going to be eligible if they are convicted.
They're going to go through the process. It's going to take a number of years. They're going to claim a bunch of resources. They're going to be protected in Canada while they do that. Do you think that's fair to the rest of the citizens of Canada?
I think that you are misstating what is likely to happen. They've been charged with extortion. They will be tried for that offense. If they are convicted of that offense, they will be ineligible because the eligibility requirements make them ineligible. I don't think it would take years to determine eligibility. What may take time, and I don't know how long it would take, is the criminal process regarding extortion.
In your experience, do people like that? So let's follow that through and say that yes, they were deemed ineligible. In your experience, do people like that leave the country?
Certainly, if people have been convicted of offenses, they are likely to be deported because they're in custody. And so, for example, what typically happens is that if they're given a custodial sentence, then they are subject to removal from Canada virtually on the date of release from the custodial sentence. So they do tend to be removed.
We all know that the CBSA can only remove so many people. We have a very limited amount of people that get removed. So in your experience, do people hang around until they're actually removed, or do they voluntarily leave the country?
In the situation you described, if somebody is subject to a custodial sentence, they don't hang around. Typically, CBSA actually historically has prioritized people who are serving criminal sentences because they're frankly easy to find. They don't get released. They often end up being put immediately into immigration detention, which may or may not be, in fact, in a jail or in a detention center. So actually, those are the people probably most likely to be deported.
And yet, I think it wasn't that long ago we saw a report that said there were 34,000, I think, people in this status that were in our country that had not been deported yet. Do you recognize that? Sorry,
in what status? Do you mean people who have been convicted of criminal offenses?
Needed to be deported, but they weren't.
It's people who need to be deported. So that's a very large category. That includes most of those people have never been charged or convicted of a criminal offense. They're just people who are found to not have any legal status anymore for one reason or another. One of the challenges about that number, though, 34,000, is that Canada, like most countries, doesn't actually have exit controls. So the government may say that there are 34,000 people subject to removal. That is, removal notices have been issued. What the government doesn't know typically is how many of those people have actually left of their own accord, because they don't check in with the government and say, hey, I'm leaving now. Now, number of those for sure will be in Canada.
Can I just interrupt for a second? We're going to run out of time. So do you think the government should be tracking who leaves the country?
I'm not sure it's feasible. The most the government currently does is track the people who leave overland from Canada to the United States. How do they do that? The United States documents people who enter the United States and then shares that information with Canada. That's how Canada registers who leaves.
It's not possible for Canada to have the technology or the capability of doing that? Is that what you're saying?
Or
is it necessary? A better question is it necessary?
You know, the truth is I don't have a strong opinion about it. If Canada wants to invest in the technology to detect who leaves the country through airports and land borders, it's certainly possible to do it. Whether you think it's worth the investment or not is a question that I haven't given enough thought to give a definitive answer.
Thank
But,
you.
It's